If you're early in your career, there's a moment that sneaks up on you. Nobody announces it, nobody labels it, but suddenly the work feels heavier. You're still drawing and coordinating and answering comments, yet there's a low grade tension underneath everything. Projects feel messier the longer they go, feedback feels less predictable, and rework shows up where you didn't expect it. And most people grab the same explanation. Well, we have a communication problem. You're listening to The Practice of Practice, a podcast for architects, designers, and emerging professionals navigating the gap between school and real work. We focus on the realities most people only learn through experience: workflow, judgment, responsibility, and time. It's not theory, it's practice. This episode is about why that diagnosis is usually wrong. Most friction in practice doesn't come from poor communication. It comes from misalignment. And that distinction matters once you start getting freedom, trust, and room to make decisions. Communication moves information. Alignment moves intent. And that shift changes everything fast. So if you're in that 0 to 5 year window, this is the phase where you start touching judgment, not just output. It can feel like more work for worse results. You're not broken. You're just in a different category of problems. Let's name it and talk about what to do with it. Early on, the work feels clean, not because it's easy, but because the boundaries are tight. You're given direction, you're given red lines, you're told what to update and what to leave alone. Your job is simply execution. And if something goes wrong, it's usually obvious why. A missed dimension or a coordination miss, a detail that never got picked up. Mistakes are visible and they're contained. Then something shifts. You get asked to take a pass, a little bit of freedom. You're told to see what you come up with. You're trusted to run with something instead of waiting for instruction. On paper, that's progress. And it is, but this is also the moment when things start to feel messier. Rework increases, feedback becomes less predictable. You start getting comments that sound like, "That's not what I meant," even though nobody actually even said what they meant. A lot of people assume that means that they're bad at communicating. They're not. What's happening is that alignment just entered the picture. Because before, alignment was handled for you. Decisions were upstream, and intent was embedded in the red lines and the markups, and then the quick hallway conversations that you weren't involved in. Now you're closer to the decision-making surface. You're making small calls, picking between options, filling gaps, and that means you're exposed to ambiguity that used to be invisible. Here's what that looks like in real life. You thought you were designing, but your project manager thought you were testing a direction. You thought red lines were optional, but they were directional. You thought silence meant approval, but really it was just the person being busy. None of that is a communication failure. Information moved and drawings were shared, emails were sent, and meetings happened. But what didn't happen was alignment. And the reason this phase feels so uncomfortable is because it feels like regression. You were doing fine, and now things feel heavy. But you're not regressing. You're just touching responsibility. Responsibility without alignment always feels like friction. It feels like you're carrying weight you didn't sign up for, even though you did the second you got more freedom. This is also why this stage creates that background stress. You're still doing the same tasks, but you're guessing now what the task really is. Is the goal to make it better or to make it faster? Is the goal to match the standard or are we challenging it? Is the goal to solve the problem or to show progress? Those are all alignment questions, and they used to be answered for you. When they're not answers, you invent answers. You pick a direction that feels reasonable. You draft the sheet, you detail a corner, you send a coordination email, but then you get a reply that changes the rules. Not because someone's trying to move the goalpost, but because the goal was never stated out loud. And here's the trap. You can do work and still be misaligned. You can be productive and still be wrong. That's why autonomy feels like it punishes effort. It's not punishing effort. It's revealing missing alignment. Freedom sounds clean. Everyone wants it. Everyone works toward it. But freedom creates a specific pressure early in your career because freedom shows up before clarity does. Nobody re-explains the rules. Nobody restates priorities every time. Expectations stop being said out loud. So assumptions rush in to fill the gaps. You stop asking questions you used to ask, not because you don't have them, but because you don't want to look like you shouldn't have freedom yet. You hear run with it, and then you treat it like a blank check. You hear take ownership, and you assume that means decide. Sometimes it does. Sometimes it means carry it, not choose it. And that difference is alignment. The uncomfortable part is most early career missteps aren't technical, they're interpretive. You interpret tone as intent, you interpret speed as urgency, you interpret vague approval as a green light, and then you move. Confidence helps you move, but with confidence without alignment, it's just guessing without better posture. And that's where friction comes from. One person thinks you're exploring options. Another person thinks you're landing a solution. One person thinks you're polishing. Another person thinks you're still roughing it in. Same drawings, same email chain, but completely different expectations. So the feedback lands like a surprise. You get, why'd you go that far? Or why didn't you go any further? Or the classic, this one's fine, but it's not what I had in mind. And that comment feels personal because you did real work, but it's not personal. It's missing alignment. Alignment is not agreement. It's shared understanding. What are we solving? What matters most? What constraints are real? What trade-offs are allowed? Who decides? If those things are fuzzy, you can communicate perfectly and still end up in rework. That's why this phase feels like you're doing more for worse results. Ambiguity increases faster than judgment does. And nobody tells you that this is normal. They just tell you to be more proactive. And proactive is fine, but misaligned proactive is expensive. Think about the situations where you'll feel the friction. You draft a plan, and the next red line isn't about the plan. It's about why you thought the plan was the assignment. You send an RFI response with a clean answer, and the reply is, hold, we need to confirm the intent with the owner. You coordinate a ceiling plan, and MVP moves something, and suddenly the question isn't coordination, it's scope. Well, who owns that compromise? You write meeting minutes that capture decisions, and someone says, we didn't decide that. You did not mishear them. You captured what you thought the words meant. That's alignment again. Or construction administration. You email a contractor trying to be helpful. You clarify a detail, and then your PM asks, did we just change the contract? You were communicating. You just weren't aligned on authority. Freedom increases your contact with these edge cases. The skill is not talking more. The skill is pausing before you speak and asking, what are we aligned on here? That pause feels small, but it saves weeks. When you feel the urge to fill in silence with an answer, treat that as a signal. If you're not sure what success means, ask first. That's alignment. At this stage, there's a phrase that quietly causes a lot of damage. Clear enough. Clear enough to start. Clear enough to move forward. Clear enough to not ask another question. Clear enough feels mature. It feels efficient. It feels like confidence. And it feels like you're keeping momentum. But clear enough almost always means you filled the gaps yourself. You decided what mattered. You decided what the real constraint was. You decided what level of finish was expected. You decided how much authority you had. Sometimes you guess right. When you guess wrong, the cost shows up later. Rework, frustration, that sticky feeling that you're always slightly out of sync with feedback. This is where people think they need to communicate better. So they explain, they write longer emails, they narrate their reasoning, they justify decisions. They put notes on the drawings. They prepare a defense before the pinup even happens. But explanation after the fact is expensive. It doesn't change direction. It only explains why the wrong direction made sense in your head. And the more you explain, the more you reveal that the alignment never happened. Here's a practical version. If you don't know what success looks like, clear enough is a coin flip. If you don't know the priority order, clear enough means you'll optimize the wrong thing. If you don't know who decides, clear enough means you'll probably decide by accident. This is why early autonomy can feel like it punishes effort. You worked hard and the work still gets tossed. It's not because the work is bad, it's because the work was built on assumptions. Assumptions are invisible until they collide. So the move is not to become a better explainer. The move is to become an early aligner. Early alignment is not a big speech. It's a small reset at the front edge of the work. What are we solving? What matters most? What can wait? What would be a win at this stage? If you ask those questions early, you reduce the need to explain later. This is also where the good soldier instinct shows up. You want to be easy to work with. You want to be the person who just gets it done. So you treat ambiguity like a test. You think, well, if I ask, it'll look like I can't handle it. So you don't ask. You pick a path and you move fast because speed reads as competence. The problem is that speed also hides misalignment until it becomes expensive. Picture a simple scenario. You're told to update a classroom plan. You assume the goal is cleaner circulations. You tighten the layout. You adjust the door swing. You shift casework around. And you feel proud because it's objectively better. But then you find out the real goal was budget and standardization, and you just created 3 custom conditions. Nothing you did was sloppy. It was misaligned. Or a submittal. You review it for technical compliance. You comment for accuracy. Then someone says, we needed to accept this to keep the schedule. You were right, but again, misaligned on priority. Or an RFI. You answer the question. You make the call. Then you learn the owner has a preference that drives the entire detail. You were communicating. You were not aligned on the intent. Clear enough makes all of these outcomes more likely. So when you hear yourself say, it's probably fine, that phrase is usually a flare. Go get alignment for 2 minutes, then go to work. From the outside, senior architects can look decisive. They move quickly, and they don't seem rattled by ambiguity, and their work doesn't get torn apart as often. It's tempting to think that that's confidence or talent or some secret technical knowledge. Some of it's experience, but a lot of it's alignment work that you don't notice. Senior architects don't talk more, they talk earlier. They restate priorities out loud. They name constraints explicitly, and they clarify who decides before they draw. They say, this is a test, not a solution. They'll say, this solves one issue, not all of them. Or they'll say, if this conflicts with X, X wins. Those statements sound simple, almost obvious, but they're preventing weeks of downstream confusion because they turn a fuzzy assignment into a bounded one. That's the invisible part of leadership you're just starting to touch. Not knowing more answers. Knowing what needs to be aligned before answers matter. This is also why seniors can look calmer in meetings. They're not calmer because they care less. They're calmer because they're not guessing what the meeting is for. They know whether it's for direction, for review, for decisions, or for record. They set that expectation early, sometimes with a sentence. When that sentence is missing, the room fills the gaps with assumptions, and you get that familiar feeling. Lots of talking, no traction. So if you want to think like a senior earlier than your years, here's a good starting point. Stop trying to be the person with the fastest answer. Be the person who asks, what are we deciding right now? Alignment is not consensus. It's not everyone agreeing. It's everyone understanding the same thing at the same time. Priority, constraint, trade-off, authority. Senior people do that work up front, even when it feels boring. They will ask questions that sound simple because simple questions surface hidden differences. What does done mean for this phase? Are we optimizing for cost, schedule, or experience? Is this a preference or a requirement? Who needs to sign off? They also name what won't be solved yet. This is a good issue, but not for today. Or we'll carry that through to DD. Your parking stays as is. Focus on the entries. That is alignment as a design activity. It's shaping the problem before you shape the solution. And when you watch a senior person do it well, it can look like they're shutting ideas down, but they're not. They're protecting the project from wandering. They're protecting optionality. Because once you draw something, it becomes real. Someone prices it, someone coordinates around it, someone shows it to a client, and then it becomes a promise. So seniors are careful about what becomes real too early. That's why their communication looks efficient. It's not because they're better writers. It's because they're aligning intent before they spend the effort. Early career architects often think alignment is someone else's job. It's not. You can do alignment at your scale. You can align a detail, a sheet, a meeting note, a response. Small alignment compounds and then reduces the need for rescue later. When alignment is missing, most early career architects compensate the same way. They produce more. More drawings, more options, more emails, faster turnarounds. That output feels safe. It's visible, or it feels like effort. It feels like you're being useful. Alignment feels risky. It requires slowing down. It requires asking questions that might expose uncertainty. So instead of aligning, people explain. They write long emails. They prepare talking points for pinups. They narrate their reasoning step by step, hoping that the logic will protect the work. But if you're explaining after the fact, alignment already failed. Explanation is not clarity, it's cleanup. And cleanup creates noise. More people get copied. More opinions get layered in. Accountability gets diluted. You also get the sneaky version of overcommunication. Repeating the same conversation in different formats. You have a meeting, then you send an email. Then you email, and then another Teams message. Then a Teams message, and then another meeting to clear it up. Nothing clears up, because the missing part is not the information, it's intent. And that's why some parts of projects feel like they've infinite coordination. They don't. They have infinite misalignment. And here's the hard truth for the 0 to 5 year career starters. You can be the most responsive person in the room and still be creating risk. Fast replies feel like competence, but a fast reply that commits the team to an assumption is not helpful. It's just fast. So if you feel yourself drafting a long explanation, pause. Ask yourself, what alignment question should have been asked earlier? What priority is unclear? What constraint is unstated? Who actually decides? Then ask that briefly. One clean alignment question beats 3 paragraphs of explanation. Here are a few common early patterns. If you're early in your career, you get a comment from a consultant, you forward it with a long summary trying to be helpful, but you don't say what we're doing about it. That's communication without alignment. You issue an updated sheet and write a paragraph of what changed, but you don't say which change is driving the set. That's communication without priority. You respond to a contractor question and you answer the technical point, but you don't check whether the answer affects cost or schedule. That's communication without trade-offs. Or in design, you come to a check-in with 5 options because you want to show effort, but nobody agreed that the meeting was for options. They expected a recommendation, and now the meeting just turns into a debate. Overcommunication is also a way to avoid ownership. If you send enough information, you can feel like you did your part, but ownership is not sending information. Ownership is helping the team decide what to do next. And that does not require you to be the boss. It requires you to frame the decision. Even one sentence helps. Here are the options. Here's what I recommend, and here's the risk. That's alignment in miniature, and it prevents the project from drifting. If you want a simple test, listen for the phrase, just to keep everyone in the loop. That loop gets big when alignment's missing. Shrink the loop with the smallest group who actually needs to decide. Clarify the decision, then move today. Alignment doesn't require authority. It requires orientation. At your level, alignment sounds like small questions asked early before you sink hours into the wrong thing. Before I go too far, can I confirm what matters most here? Is this meant to explore options or land something? Who ultimately decides this? Those questions do not signal insecurity, they signal judgment. They tell the people around you that you're thinking about the work in context, not just in isolation. Here's another one that helps a lot. What would make this a win at this stage? And that one's good because it forces people to say the quiet part out loud. Sometimes the win is speed. Sometimes it's cost. Sometimes it's minimal disruption. Sometimes it's a client-facing story that builds confidence. If you don't know which one we're chasing, you'll chase the wrong one. Alignment is also about naming what you're doing. Not a long explanation, a label. This is a test. This is a placeholder. This is the recommendation. This is the risk if we choose it. When you label your work, you reduce misinterpretation. And when misinterpretation drops, rework drops. This is the part nobody tells you. People trust you with more responsibility when you align early, not when you move fast. Speed without alignment creates cleanup. Alignment creates trust. And trust is what compounds over time. When you send work up for review, write 3 lines. Line 1, what this is. Line 2, what you need. Line 3, what you will do next. Example, this is a test layout for classroom 104 focused on circulation and supervision. I need confirmation on the priority, standardization or flexibility. If we agree on standardization, I'll convert this to the typical module and update the sheet set. That is alignment in writing without a novel. In a meeting, do the same thing out loud. Say, can I confirm the goal? Can I confirm the constraint? Can I confirm who decides? And then you work. You don't need to ask 10 questions. You need the right 2. Because alignment is not about perfect certainty. It's about removing the biggest unknowns before you commit effort. And when you get good at that, your freedom starts feeling like freedom, not friction. If you feel awkward doing this, it's normal. You're changing the default. Give it a month. People will quietly start expecting it from you. So if work feels heavier right now, don't immediately blame yourself. And don't default to a communication problem. Ask a different question. Where did we assume alignment? Where did we skip it? Where did we let clear enough turn into a guess? Because communication is about transferring information. Alignment is about sharing intent. And once you start getting freedom, intent matters more than volume. This is why you can have a week full of meetings and still feel stuck. You didn't miss a meeting. You missed alignment. The fix is rarely another explanation. It's a small reset early on. What are we solving? What matters most? What can wait? And who decides? Those questions aren't slowing the team down. They're removing the parts that create the rework, the frustration, and the churn later. If you're in your first 5 years and this feels unfamiliar, good. That means you're close to the real work. You're moving from output to judgment, and that's the point. Next time you feel the urge to push through uncertainty, treat that as a signal. Just pause for 2 minutes, align, then draw. That habit will save you years and make your work lighter overall. The practice of architecture is not intuitive, but it is learnable. So don't worry, we'll keep building from here. This podcast only works if it gets passed along, not because of me, but because the hardest parts of practice are usually learned in isolation. If this episode put words to something you've been struggling with, share it with someone earlier in practice, or leave a comment naming the moment that hit. I'm doing this because I remember how long it took to realize that I wasn't behind. I just wasn't being taught. Most of what feels like a personal failure in this profession is actually a shared pattern. The more we name those patterns, the faster we all get better. I'll see you in the next one.